Hey everybody, this is old Murray back with you on this new edition of Lone Star Diary. And we'll get to it in just a moment. Well, howdy folks, I'm glad to have you back with me this evening. Haven't done one of these in a while and I apologize for that. We're going to make up for it tonight. I believe this will be the 36th episode. I'm not sure, but I believe that's correct. And tonight I'm going to tell you about the time when camels came to Texas. That's right, camels came to Texas. You know, even some Texans might know that once upon a time the Lone Star State was home to not only longhorns and buffalo, but another ornery and smelly beast, the North African camel. Information obtained from the New Handbook of Texas Online reveals an interesting story about how the camel happened to find its way from the African coast all the way to Texas. The story goes that in 1836 the United States was already looking into the possibility of using camels in Florida because of the animal's ability to keep on the move with a minimum amount of water and food. Now, when Texas joined the Union, it seemed that the tough old camel would be just what was needed to move supplies for the U.S. Army in its campaign against hostile Indians and Mexican bandits. Yeah, the camel, they felt, would be happy for that, and on March 3, 1855, by an act of Congress, $30,000 was made available for the purchase of camels to be employed for military purposes. Now, I've got some information that I acquired from articles, several different articles. One of them was Texas Camel Tales, and one that was by Chris Emmett. And then there was another one by O.D.B. Fawkes, which he called the U.S. Camel Corps, an Army experiment. So those are my sources. I always like to give credit where credit is due. So we'll start with some of that. And again, it's camels in Texas. On May 10th of 1855, Major H.C. Wayne received the special presidential assignment. The Naval Store Ship Supply, in command of Lieutenant D.D. Porter, was placed at Wayne's disposal. Wayne traveled ahead to study continental use of the camels. After trafficking down the North African coast and spending $12,000 for what he thought were desirable beasts, he returned with 33 camels, 3 Arabs and 2 Turks. 32 of the camels, plus 1 calf born at sea, arrived at Old Indianola, Texas on April 29th of 1856. On June the 4th, Wayne started his caravan westward. They stopped near Victoria, where the animals were clipped, and Mrs. Mary A. Shirkey spun and knit for the President of the United States a pair of camel pile socks. The camels were finally located at Camp Verde, where several successful experiments were made to test the camel's utility in the pursuit of Indians and the transportation of burdens. Wayne reported that camels rose and walked with as much as 600 pounds without difficulty. They traveled miles without water and ate almost any kind of plant. One camel trek was made to the then unexplored Big Bend country. During the Civil War, 80 camels and 2 Egyptian drivers passed into Confederate hands. The camels soon were widely scattered. Some were turned out on the open range near Camp Verde. Some were used to pack cotton bales to Brownsville, and one found its way to the infantry command of Captain Sterling Price, who used it throughout the war to carry the whole company's baggage. In 1866, the federal government sold the camels at auction. So the failure of the camel in the United States was not really due to its capability, because every test showed it to be a superior transport animal. It was instead the nature of the beasts which led to their demise. They smelled horrible, they frightened horses, and were detested by handlers accustomed to the more docile mules. 2 private importations of camels followed the government experiment. On October 16, 1858, Mrs. M.J. Watson reported to Galveston port authorities that her ship had 98 camels aboard, and she claimed she wanted to test them for purposes of transport. One port official, however, felt that she was using the camels to mask an odor that was typically associated with the slave ship, and so Galveston refused her petition to unload the cargo. After 2 months in port, Mrs. Watson sailed for the slave markets in Cuba after dumping the camels ashore in Galveston. So indeed, Mrs. Watson was running a horrific slave ship. She left them in Galveston, and they finally wandered around and about the city and died from neglect and slaughter around the coastal sand dunes. A second civilian shipment of 12 camels arrived at Port Lavaca in 1859, where it met a similar fate. So maybe the Army had good intentions, friends, with bringing the camels over here. And the Civil War probably messed things up, and the Confederates didn't really take to them. They didn't really use them in a way where it would have been quite productive for the Confederate Army. And then you have these people, these ugly people that wanted to use those ships to haul slaves, and then talk about them being camel haulers, which indeed they were not. So that's the story of when the camel came to Texas. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be with me again in a week or two for another Lone Star Diary. But for now, I'll just be saying so long. I'll see you down the road, and God bless Texas. Good night, everybody.